On a scorching morning in June 2002, Dubai's pristine desert landscape revealed a dark secret. The body of a young Indian woman was discovered half-buried in the Golden Sands, 40 kilometers from the city. The discovery would unravel a web of secrets that reached from the humble streets of Karama to the highest echelons of Dubai society. This wasn't just another missing person case. This was the story of Priya Sharma. In early 2002, 28-year-old Priya Sharma was living what seemed to be a picture-perfect expatriate life in Dubai. A dutiful wife, loving mother, and rising star in the local catering business, she was known for her infectious smile and remarkable Indian cooking. But beneath the surface of her seemingly ordinary life lay a maze of dangerous secrets, forbidden desires, and fatal decisions. The investigation into her death would expose the dark underbelly of Dubai's glittering facade, where wealth, power, and tradition collide with devastating consequences. As detectives untangled the complex web of relationships surrounding Priya's life, they discovered that sometimes the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. The morning sun had barely risen over Dubai's skyline when Priya Sharma began her daily ritual. At 5 a.m., while the rest of Karama slept, the aroma of fresh cardamom and saffron wafted through the narrow corridors of Al Mankul apartments. Her small kitchen, barely large enough for 2 people, had become her sanctuary, her escape, and unknowingly, the first step toward her fate. February 2002 marked her 5th year in Dubai. Like thousands of other Indian expatriates, the Sharmas had arrived chasing the desert dream, a better life, private school education for their children, and the promise of prosperity that Dubai dangled before its seekers. Vikram, her husband, had secured a position as an IT professional at one of the city's growing tech companies. The salary was decent, enough to afford their modest 3-bedroom apartment in Karama, but far from the luxury that Dubai flaunted on its glossy billboards. From her 4th-floor balcony, Priya would watch the parade of Mercedes and BMWs heading toward the more affluent neighborhoods. Her own life played out in a different Dubai, one of early morning school runs, careful budgeting, and the constant hum of ceiling fans fighting against the desert heat. Yet there was something about Priya that set her apart from the other housewives in their building. Perhaps it was the way she carried herself, always immaculately dressed even for simple grocery runs, or the determined glint in her eyes that suggested ambitions beyond her current station. Her catering business had started small, just a few orders for neighbors' parties, tiffin services for bachelors, and occasional community gatherings. But Priya had a gift that went beyond her cooking skills. She understood people's desires, their need to feel special, to taste something beyond the ordinary. Each dish she prepared told a story, carried a memory, created a moment. Word spread quickly through the Indian community about the woman who could make simple dal taste like a royal feast. Vikram initially supported her venture, proud of his wife's initiative to contribute to their savings. The extra income meant better clothes for the children, occasional dinners at mid-range restaurants, and the ability to send a bit more money home to aging parents in Delhi. But success, even modest success, has a way of stirring waters best left undisturbed. "She's changed," Mrs. Kapoor from the 3rd floor would whisper to her friends during their evening gossip sessions. "Have you seen her new gold earrings? And that designer handbag? My husband works in banking, and even I think twice before such purchases." The whispers weren't entirely without foundation. By early 2002, subtle changes had begun to appear in Priya's lifestyle. The changes were small at first, a new watch here, a better brand of makeup there. She explained them away as gifts from satisfied customers or good deals from the Dubai Shopping Festival. Vikram, consumed by his own professional challenges, barely noticed these incremental shifts in their lifestyle. Their children, 9-year-old Arya and 6-year-old Arjun, attended the Indian high school, where Priya never missed a parent-teacher meeting or a school function. She was the mother who always volunteered for event committees, who organized birthday parties that other children envied, who somehow managed to make their middle-class life seem glamorous through sheer force of presentation. But there were signs, subtle indicators that something was shifting beneath the perfect surface. The unexplained absences began in late February, short at first, easily explained by catering deliveries or grocery shopping. Her phone would sometimes ring late at night, calls she would take on the balcony, speaking in hushed tones. When questioned, She would dismiss them as inquiries about catering orders from overseas clients, people planning events in Dubai. Time differences, she would say with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. You know how these NRI clients are, always planning elaborate parties months in advance. The breaking point might have been the day she received that call, the one that made her hands tremble as she wrote down the details in her order book. A client unlike any other, an opportunity that could change everything. But opportunities in Dubai often came wrapped in layers of complexity, each layer hiding its own dangers. Vikram noticed her distraction that evening as she meticulously planned her menu, writing and rewriting lists until late into the night. "It's just another order," he said, trying to ease her visible tension. "Don't stress yourself so much." But it wasn't just another order, and deep down, perhaps Vikram knew it too. The next morning, Priya dressed with extra care, her best silk saree, subtle makeup that enhanced her natural beauty, and those new gold earrings that had set the neighborhood tongues wagging. She spent an unusually long time in front of the mirror, adjusting her appearance until it was perfect. "I'll be back by lunch," she told Vikram, her voice carrying a confidence that seemed almost rehearsed. "It's just a meeting to discuss the menu and requirements." As she walked out of their apartment building that morning, several neighbors noticed her departure. Mrs. Kapoor, watering her plants on her third-floor balcony, watched as Priya stepped into a black SUV with tinted windows, not the usual taxi or her regular delivery van. The vehicle's luxury and anonymity seemed out of place in their modest neighborhood. That meeting, though none knew it at the time, would set in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead to that devastating discovery in the desert 4 months later. But on that February morning, Priya was still just another Dubai resident chasing a dream, still just a woman trying to bridge the gap between ambition and reality, still alive with possibilities. The black SUV pulled away from Karama's crowded streets, carrying Priya toward the glittering heart of Dubai. As the modest apartments gave way to gleaming skyscrapers, she clutched her recipe book closer to her chest, her knuckles white with tension. In her bag, a business card caught the morning light, its gold lettering promising connections to a world she had only observed from a distance. The Ul Wazl Community Center buzzed with activity during the annual Spring Food Festival. Stalls lined with aromatic dishes from across India filled the air with a symphony of spices. Priya's table, modest compared to the professional caterers around her, drew unexpected attention. Her signature biryani, layered with saffron-kissed rice and tender meat, had created a quiet stir among the festival-goers. Sheikh Latifa, wife of Sheikh Khalid bin Mohammed Al Maktoum, hadn't planned to attend such a community event. Her presence, accompanied by an entourage of assistants, caused a ripple of whispers through the crowd. She moved through the festival with practiced grace, sampling dishes with polite interest until she reached Priya's stall. The moment would later be recalled differently by various witnesses. Some would say it was the aroma that drew the Sheikha's attention. Others would insist it was divine intervention, or perhaps something more sinister. But all agreed on one detail. When Sheikh Latifa tasted Priya's awadhi mushroom korma, something shifted in the air. "Who made this?" The Sheikha's question cut through the festival's noise. Priya stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. Her silver salwar kameez, carefully chosen that morning, suddenly felt inadequate before the Sheikha's quiet elegance. "I did, Your Highness." Priya's voice remained steady, masking her nerves. "It's my grandmother's recipe, with a few modest adaptations." The Sheikha's eyes, sharp and assessing, studied Priya with an intensity that made the surrounding crowd fade away. "We are hosting a Ramadan gathering next week. 50 guests. Can you handle such an order?" The question hung in the air like a pendulum between two worlds. This wasn't just a catering request. It was a door opening to a realm Priya had only glimpsed from afar. She thought of her tiny kitchen, her limited staff, the logistics of cooking for royalty. But ambition spoke louder than doubt. "Yes, Your Highness. It would be my honor." The next week passed in a blur of preparation. Priya hired 2 helpers, spent her savings on premium ingredients, and worked through nights perfecting each dish. Vikram watched with growing unease as their apartment transformed into a professional kitchen. "Are you sure about this?" he asked one night, finding her practicing garnish techniques at 2 a.m. These people. Their world is different from ours. Priya's response was distracted, her focus on the delicate arrangement before her. This is our chance, Vikram. Do you know what regular palace orders could mean for us? For the children's future. The night of the gathering arrived. Priya's dishes, arranged with painstaking precision on silver platters, were transported to the palace in a convoy of refrigerated vans. She supervised every detail, her usual confidence amplified by determination. This was her moment, her bridge to a better life. She didn't expect to meet Sheikh Khalid himself. He appeared in the kitchen during the final preparations, his presence announcing itself through the sudden stillness that fell over the staff. Tall, distinguished, with gray-streaked hair and eyes that carried the weight of authority, he moved through the space with the ease of a man accustomed to power. So you're the one who has impressed my wife. His English carried the polished accent of a London education. He lifted the lid of a dish, inhaling the aroma. Tell me about this. For the next 15 minutes, Priya found herself explaining the history and technique behind each dish to one of Dubai's most powerful men. Sheikh Khalid listened with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions about spice combinations and regional variations. His knowledge of Indian culture surprised her. I spent a semester studying in Delhi, he explained, noting her surprise. The complexity of Indian cuisine always fascinated me. But this. He gestured to her spread. This is something special. The evening was a triumph. Guests raved about the food, with several requesting Priya's contact information. But it was Sheikh Khalid's parting words that would echo in her mind for days to come. We host cultural events regularly at the palace, he said, handing her a business card embossed with gold lettering. I think your talents could add something unique to our gatherings. My office will be in touch. That night, driving home in a palace-provided car, Priya clutched the business card like a talisman. The city lights blurred past her window, and for the first time, Dubai's glittering towers didn't seem so far out of reach. But success, like a powerful perfume, has a way of drawing attention. Within days, whispers spread through Karama. How had a simple home caterer landed such a prestigious client? What really happened at the palace? And why was Sheikh Khalid himself taking such interest in her cooking? The palace orders became regular, twice a month at first, then weekly. Each visit pulled Priya deeper into a world of luxury and protocol. She learned to navigate palace politics, to dress appropriately for her new clientele, to carry herself with the confidence her position required. Vikram watched these changes with growing apprehension. The woman who returned home from palace events seemed different, more distant, somehow untouchable. Their children boasted at school about their mother cooking for royalty, but he noticed how she stayed longer at the palace each time, coming home with stories she couldn't quite finish. They're just clients, Priya would insist when he voiced his concerns. But her eyes would drift to the city lights visible from their balcony, and sometimes she would touch the gold business card she now carried everywhere, as if reassuring herself it was real. What no one knew then, what would only become clear in the harsh light of later investigations, was that this was more than a simple story of success. With each palace visit, each interaction with Sheikh Khalid, each step into that glittering world, Priya was walking into a carefully laid trap. The warmth in Sheikh Khalid's eyes when he discussed Indian cuisine, his casual touches when examining her dishes, the private conversations about culture and tradition, all were threads in a web that would ultimately lead to her destruction. But on those spring evenings in 2002, as Priya moved confidently through palace kitchens, all she saw was opportunity. All she felt was the intoxicating rush of finally being recognized, appreciated, valued. She didn't notice how Sheikh Khalid's eyes followed her movements, didn't recognize the danger in his growing interest in her work. Or perhaps she did, and chose to ignore it, seduced by the promise of a life beyond the confines of Karama. After all, in Dubai, dreams could come true. But no one mentioned that nightmares could too. The March heat wrapped around Dubai like a silk shawl, but within the palace walls, a different kind of warmth was blooming. Priya found herself navigating the marble corridors with increasing familiarity, her footsteps echoing through spaces that no longer felt forbidden. The kitchen, once merely a workspace, transformed into an intimate theater where culture, ambition, and dangerous attraction performed their daily dance. Sheikh Khalid's presence became as regular as the call to prayer. He would appear in the kitchen during odd hours, ostensibly to discuss menu variations but inevitably staying for conversations that meandered like the ancient trade routes between India and Arabia. His timing was always impeccable, arriving just as the kitchen staff departed, when the day's chaos settled into evening calm. "Tell me about your grandmother's kitchen in Lucknow," he would say, his British-accented voice carrying genuine curiosity. Priya's hands would move instinctively through the motions of cooking as she spoke, the rhythm of her bangles creating a soundtrack to her stories. She painted pictures with her words, of pre-dawn preparations for wedding feasts, of secrets passed down through generations of women, of spice combinations that could make emperors weep. Sheikh Khalid listened with an intensity that made her feel both seen and exposed, as if he were reading between the lines of her carefully curated tales. "In Lucknow," she explained one evening, carefully folding cardamom into saffron-kissed rice, "food is not just sustenance. It's history, culture, love, all wrapped in layers like a perfect biryani." Her hands trembled slightly as she worked, aware of his eyes following her movements. "You're a storyteller, Priya," he observed, "but your medium is flavor instead of words." The way he said her name, without her formal title, with a softness that felt intimate, sent shivers down her spine. Their conversations expanded beyond the boundaries of cuisine. Sheikh Khalid shared stories of his years at Oxford, of poetry readings in London's underground clubs, of art exhibitions in Paris. His world was so vast, so different from the careful constraints of her upbringing. Yet he spoke of India with a reverence that touched something deep within her. "Your culture," he would say, "has a depth that Dubai's glitter can't match. We build tall towers, but you have centuries of tradition in every gesture, every taste, every art form." The restaurant proposal came during one such evening. He had been watching her perfect a complicated dessert, her concentration absolute as she created delicate sugar spirals. "This talent is wasted in a home kitchen," he said suddenly. "Dubai needs something authentic, something real. It needs you." The business plan he presented was comprehensive, a high-end restaurant in Jumeirah, showcasing regional Indian cuisines. The budget made her dizzy. Millions of dirhams for construction, imported materials, staff training. When she protested that such dreams were beyond her reach, his response was immediate. "Dreams are investments, Priya. I invest in excellence." The contract arrived in a leather folder that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that spoke of serious intentions. But it was the implications that weighed heaviest, the strings that came attached to such generosity, the debt that couldn't be measured in dirhams. At home, the changes were subtle but significant. Her spice cabinet expanded to include rare ingredients gifted by Sheikh Khalid, saffron from Iran, vanilla from Madagascar, truffles from Italy. Each item represented a step away from her middle-class reality towards something more dangerous and thrilling. The daily phone calls began innocently, discussions about restaurant plans, menu concepts, staffing decisions. But soon the conversations stretched longer, deeper, more personal. Sheikh Khalid would quote Urdu poetry, his pronunciation perfect despite his British education. Priya found herself staying awake late into the night, phone pressed to her ear, lost in discussions about art, life, and dreams. Her prayers became complicated negotiations with God. In her small prayer room, surrounded by images of deities brought from India, she sought guidance. The incense smoke seemed to write questions in the air. Was ambition a form of betrayal? Could duty and desire ever coexist? The gods remained silent, but her heart spoke louder each day. The physical attraction developed like a slow-cooking curry, gradually, inexorably, until its presence could no longer be ignored. It began with accidental touches during cooking demonstrations, lingering glances across meeting tables, the electric awareness of his presence behind her as she worked. His cologne, subtle, expensive, masculine, began to haunt her dreams. Their meetings moved beyond the kitchen. Sheikh Khalid created reasons for private tastings in the palace gardens, for discussions in his personal study. Each new space felt more intimate than the last, each conversation more charged with unspoken possibilities. The guilt came in waves. Sometimes it would hit her during morning prayers, or while watching her children sleep, or during quiet moments with Vikram. Her husband's simple devotion, once comforting, now felt like an accusation. She began avoiding his touch, making excuses about tiredness, stress, work demands. The restaurant project moved forward at dizzying speed. Architects were hired, permits fast-tracked, materials ordered. Sheikh Khalid's influence opened doors that should have remained forever closed to someone of her status. Each success felt like both a triumph and a step towards some inevitable catastrophe. Cultural obligations weighed heavily. Being an Indian woman in Dubai meant carrying not just personal reputation but community honor. The whispers had already started about her late meetings, her improved wardrobe, her growing confidence. Each disapproving glance in the grocery store, each sudden silence when she entered the temple, cut deep into her immigrant soul. Yet the pull toward Sheikh Khalid's world proved stronger than tradition's chains. He represented everything she had secretly yearned for: sophistication, recognition, the freedom to be more than someone's wife and mother. In his presence, she felt her true self emerging from years of careful suppression. One evening, as they stood on his private balcony overlooking the city, he quoted Ghalib, "Ishq pa zor narin, haye wo atish Ghalib, ki lagay na lage, or bujhaye na bain." The words hung in the perfumed air between them. Love cannot be forced. It's a fire that neither can be ignited nor extinguished at will. That night, driving home through Dubai's glittering streets, Priya finally admitted to herself that she had crossed a line from which there was no return. The restaurant wasn't just a business venture anymore. It was becoming her bridge to another life, her escape route from the constraints of tradition and duty. But freedom, as she would learn too late, comes with its own price tag. Each step deeper into Sheikh Khalid's world was a step away from safety, from certainty, from survival. The web of attraction, ambition, and forbidden desire was drawing her toward a fate she couldn't yet see but was powerless to avoid. In the end, it wasn't just about love or ambition or escape. It was about transformation, from dutiful wife to independent woman, from home cook to professional chef, from subject to equal. But Dubai, for all its modern facade, had ancient rules about such transformations, and the price for breaking them would prove fatal. For now, though, Priya floated on the intoxicating bubble of possibility, blind to the dangers lurking beneath the surface of her gilded dream. The woman who stared back at her from mirrors grew more sophisticated, more confident, more alive. That this awakening would lead to her destruction was still hidden in the desert winds, waiting to be revealed. The threshold between propriety and passion was crossed on a Tuesday evening in late March. Dubai's spring was fading, the scorching summer approaching, but in the palace gardens, surrounded by blooming frangipanis and the soft music of fountains, the air remained eternally perfect. Sheikh Khalid had requested Priya's presence to discuss the restaurant's final design details. At least, that's what the official calendar entry read. The palace gardens after sunset were a different world. Strategically placed lights transformed fountains into liquid gold, and the carefully maintained flowers released their heaviest perfume. Priya found herself following a palace guard through winding paths she'd never seen before, her heart racing with each step into unknown territory. Sheikh Khalid waited in a private pavilion, the kind reserved for royal contemplation. The meeting began professionally enough, blueprints spread across an antique table, discussion of kitchen layouts and dining room aesthetics. But as the evening progressed, the pretense of business slowly evaporated like dew under the desert sun. "You've transformed since I first met you," he observed, his voice carrying that cultured blend of British education and Arabic authority. "You carry yourself differently now." His hand brushed against hers as they both reached for the same document. This time, neither pulled away. The kiss, when it came, tasted of cardamom and forbidden fruit. Later, Priya would remember every detail: the soft splash of the fountain, the distant call to prayer, the way the evening breeze carried the scent of jasmine. Everything crystallized in that moment of transgression, beautiful and deadly. The next morning, a package arrived at her apartment. A sleek new iPhone, its surface gleaming with possibility and danger. The accompanying note, written in Sheikh Khalid's elegant hand, was simple: "For our private discussions, The phone became her secret lifeline to another world, hidden in her kitchen spice drawer beneath the cardamom pods and cinnamon sticks. Their messages started innocently enough, questions about recipes, discussions about restaurant progress. But soon they evolved into something more intimate. "Your smile haunts my meetings," he would write. "The palace feels empty without your presence." Each message was a small ember, building into a fire that would eventually consume everything. The affair bloomed like a desert flower after rain. Suddenly, brilliantly, dangerously. Their meetings moved from the public spaces of the palace to more private venues: his personal study, secluded garden alcoves, a private dining room with views of the city's skyline. Each location offered another level of intimacy, another step away from the safety of propriety. Sheikh Khalid's gifts became more frequent and harder to conceal. A Cartier bracelet appeared after a successful menu tasting. A Hermes handbag arrived following a particularly intimate afternoon. Each item came with a note celebrating some aspect of her talent, her beauty, her spirit. Each gift was another link in a golden chain that bound her more tightly to him. At home, the changes were impossible to hide. The physical distance between Priya and Vikram grew first. She began sleeping on the edge of their bed, avoiding his touch, making excuses about headaches and fatigue. The emotional chasm followed, widening with each unanswered question, each suspicious glance, each silent dinner. Their children became unwitting casualties of the growing tension. 6-year-old Arjun developed anxiety about his mother's absences, crying when she left fall meetings. Aya, at 9, watched with precocious understanding as her parents orbited each other like distant planets, their gravitational pull weakening day by day. "Why don't you come to my school functions anymore?" Aya asked one morning, her voice small but accusing. Priya's excuse about work commitments sounded hollow even to her own ears. The pain in her daughter's eyes cut deeper than any community gossip ever could. The Indian community of Karama, always hungry for scandal, feasted on the changes in Priya. Women who once sought her recipes now crossed the street to avoid her. The whispers grew louder with each new piece of evidence. The chauffeur-driven car that picked her up, the designer clothes she now wore, the late-night returns from business meetings. "Have you seen her new Gucci sunglasses?" they would whisper in the temple. "My husband works in banking, and even I think twice before such purchases." The judgment in their voices carried centuries of cultural expectations about a woman's place, a wife's duties, a mother's responsibilities. The grocery store became a battleground of subtle warfare. Mrs. Kapoor, the owner's wife who had once treated Priya like a daughter, now handled her money as if it carried contamination. "Business must be very good these days," she would say, eyes lingering on Priya's new jewelry. "Very good indeed." Vikram's silence was worse than any accusation. He watched as his wife transformed into a stranger, her simple salwar kameez replaced by designer saris, her humble smile evolving into something more confident, more distant. The questions, when they came, were loaded with unspoken knowledge. "Another late meeting?" he would ask, his voice carefully neutral as she prepared to leave. "With the same investor?" The word investor carried weight, heavy with implication. The arguments, when they finally erupted, shook their apartment walls. "Since when does a business partner give gifts worth more than my annual salary?" Vikram demanded one night, holding up a receipt he'd found for a diamond bracelet. Priya's attempts at explanation sounded false even to her own ears. But the pull of the affair was stronger than guilt, stronger than social pressure, stronger than family obligations. In Sheikh Khalid's world, Priya found herself intoxicated by possibilities. He showed her a Dubai she'd never known existed: private art galleries, exclusive restaurants, hidden gardens in the heart of the city. Each new experience pulled her further from her old life, deeper into a world of dangerous enchantment. Their meetings became more reckless, their passion more consuming. Sometimes they would meet in his private wing of the palace, where even the walls seemed to conspire with their secrecy. Other times, they found hidden corners of the city, boutique hotels, private villas, secluded beaches where the lines between right and wrong blurred like footprints in the sand. The restaurant project, their official excuse for spending time together, progressed at record speed. But it had become secondary to the real drama unfolding behind closed doors. The plans they poured over, the decisions they made, all served as a smokescreen for their growing obsession with each other. In quiet moments, usually late at night when she lay awake in her bed at home, Priya would feel the weight of her choices pressing down on her chest. The simple gold Mangalsutra around her neck, symbol of her marriage, felt like it was choking her. The smiling faces of her children in family photographs seemed to watch her with accusation. But in Sheikh Khalid's arms, all doubt vanished. He made her feel alive, desired, powerful. "You're extraordinary," he would whisper, his fingers tracing patterns on her skin. "You deserve so much more than a small life in Karama." The deception became easier with practice. Lies flowed smoothly, menu tasting with potential clients, meeting with suppliers, restaurant emergency. Each excuse drove another nail into the coffin of her marriage, her reputation, her old identity. What Priya couldn't see, blinded by the glitter of her new life, was that she had become a player in a game where she didn't know all the rules. The palace had eyes everywhere, and not all of them belonged to Sheikh Khalid. As she danced on the edge of propriety, others watched and waited, gathering evidence, building a case that would eventually lead to her destruction. But for now, she was lost in the intoxication of forbidden love, blind to the gathering storm. The woman who had once lived within the safe boundaries of tradition now walked dangerous paths, leaving behind a trail of broken trust and shattered relationships that would eventually lead to her doom. The price of passion, she would learn too late, was steeper than any designer gift could cover. By early May, the whispers in the palace corridors grew louder than the central fountain's gentle splash. Sheikh Latifah's sharp eyes hadn't missed the lingering glances, the private meetings that stretched into the night, the way her husband's eyes followed Priya's movements during cultural events. Each observation was catalogued, each suspicion filed away like a weapon waiting to be deployed. The first warning came through Priya's kitchen assistant, Lakshmi, whose cousin worked as a palace maid. "Madam, the Sheikha has been asking questions about you," she whispered one morning, hands trembling as she chopped onions. "She wants to know about your background, your family, every detail." But it was too late for warnings. The affair had grown bolder, more reckless. Sheikh Khalid, intoxicated by their secret romance, had begun attending Indian cultural events he'd previously ignored. At each function, his eyes would seek Priya out, their shared glances carrying weighted messages that didn't go unnoticed. The palace staff, particularly those from the Indian community, watched with growing unease. They saw the private elevator rides to his office, the late-night meetings in the garden pavilion, the way their hands would brush accidentally during food tastings. Each observation became a whispered story, traveling through the invisible network that connected Dubai's Indian expatriate community. The WhatsApp messages reached Delhi first. Priya's mother opened her phone one morning to find it flooded with concerned messages from relatives in Dubai. "Your daughter has lost her way," they said. "She's bringing shame to the family name." The news spread through family groups like wildfire, each share adding new layers of speculation and judgment. Back in Dubai, Vikram received an anonymous email. The sender, claiming to be a concerned friend, attached photos, Priya entering the Sheikh's private elevator. The two of them in what appeared to be an intimate conversation in the palace garden. A receipt for a diamond necklace worth more than Vikram's annual salary. The confrontation that followed shook their apartment walls. "How long?" Vikram demanded, throwing the printed photos onto their dining table. "How long have you been making a fool of me?" Priya's attempts at denial crumbled when Vikram started pulling out evidence he'd gathered over months. The hidden phone in the spice drawer. The expensive gifts she'd tried to conceal. Bank statements showing deposits she couldn't explain. "It's not what you think," she started, but the words sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Then what is it?" Vikram's voice cracked. "Explain to me how my wife, who used to check grocery prices, now wears diamonds worth millions. Explain to me why our children barely see their mother anymore." Their argument was interrupted by Aya's scream from the doorway. She'd returned early from her dance class, only to find her parents' carefully maintained facade crumbling. Arjun, following behind her, began having an asthma attack at the sight of their fighting parents. The next day, News of their fight had somehow reached the palace. Sheikh Khalid summoned Priya to his private office, his face dark with concern. "I'll handle this," he promised, pulling her into his arms. "No one will harm you. The restaurant opens next month. We're too close to let anything stop us now." But the Sheikh had already begun moving her pieces. That evening, Priya received a call from the Indian consulate. Her business visa status was being reviewed. The message was clear. She could lose everything with a single signature. The threats came from all directions. Anonymous calls warned her to stay in her place. The Indian Ladies Association quietly removed her name from their membership list. Even her children's school principal suggested a parent meeting to discuss the changing home situation. In desperation, Priya considered running back to India. But what waited for her there? Shame? Family disgrace? The suffocating weight of community judgment? Besides, how could she leave now, when the restaurant, her dream, was weeks away from opening? Sheikh Khalid sensed her fear. His gifts became more extravagant, his promises more elaborate. "Once the restaurant opens, everything will be different," he assured her. "I'll protect you. No one would dare touch you under my protection." But protection, Priya was learning, came with its own price tag. The Sheikh's calls became more controlling, his questions about her movements more demanding. He needed to know where she was every moment, who she spoke to, what she said. One evening, as she prepared for a final menu tasting, her mother called from Delhi. "Come home," she pleaded. "Whatever has happened, we can face it together. But this path you're on, it only ends in darkness." Priya stood on her balcony that night, watching Dubai's lights flicker like distant stars. The city that had promised her everything now felt like a gilded cage. Below, she could see Indian families taking their evening walks, children playing in the courtyard, normal lives untouched by the storm she'd created. What she didn't know then was that she was already past the point of escape. The Sheikh's network had gathered enough evidence to destroy not just her, but her entire family. The palace walls, which had once seemed like gates to heaven, were slowly closing in like a tomb. In the distance, her nearly completed restaurant glowed under construction lights. Everything she'd dreamed of was within reach. But dreams, she would soon learn, could turn into nightmares faster than Dubai's weather could change. The next morning, she made her choice. She would see this through, no matter the cost. As she dressed in her finest sari, preparing for another day at the palace, she didn't realize she was dressing for her own funeral. The perfume she dabbed on her wrists would become her last scent. The goodbye kiss she gave her sleeping children would be their final memory of their mother. The game was ending, but Priya didn't know she had already lost. May 15th, 2002, dawned like any other Dubai summer day, scorching and bright. Priya spent extra time getting ready that morning, selecting a powder blue silk sari with silver threadwork. Her movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic, as she applied her signature jasmine perfume. Something in her eyes, reflected in the mirror, spoke of finality. "I'll be late tonight," she told Vikram, her voice steadier than it had been in weeks. "The restaurant paperwork needs to be finalized." It was the closest to truth she'd spoken in months. She hugged her children longer than usual, breathing in their innocent scents, memorizing their warmth. The security cameras at Al Majid Palace captured her arrival at 7:42 p.m. The footage, later scrutinized by countless investigators, showed her walking with characteristic grace through the palace's marble corridors. Her blue sari shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, a final flash of beauty before the darkness. She had composed the message to Sheikh Khalid that morning: "We need to talk. About everything." His reply was immediate: "My private office. 8 p.m. Come alone." The restaurant was set to open in 2 weeks. Priya had made her decision. She would sign over her stake in the business, take her children, and return to India. The shame of returning as a divorced woman seemed preferable to the suffocating web of lies she'd woven. What happened next exists only in fragments, pieced together from security footage, phone records, and witness statements that would emerge during the investigation. 8:03 p.m. Palace security logs show Priya entering Sheikh Khalid's private wing. 8:17 p.m. Her last WhatsApp status update, sometimes endings are new beginnings. 8:45 p.m. A call to her children's phone, unanswered. 9:22 p.m. Final ping from her cell phone, somewhere in the palace complex. Then, silence. Vikram waited until midnight before making the first call to her phone. By 2 a.m., he had called everyone he could think of. The children sat huddled on the couch, still in their school uniforms, watching their father pace. Dawn broke over Dubai without any sign of Priya. Her absence, initially a concern, transformed into something more sinister as the hours ticked by. At 10 a.m., Vikram walked into Dubai police station to file a missing person report. The initial police response was tepid. Missing persons often returned on their own, especially in cases involving family disputes. But when Vikram mentioned the palace connection, the atmosphere in the station shifted noticeably. By evening, the Indian embassy had become involved. The missing woman was, after all, an Indian national, and her connection to the royal family made the case diplomatically sensitive. The palace's official statement was brief. Mrs. Sharma attended a business meeting regarding her upcoming restaurant venture. She left the premises at approximately 9:30 p.m., but security footage showing her exit was mysteriously corrupted. The investigation hit its first major snag when detectives requested access to the palace's private wing. The response was diplomatic but firm. Such access required permissions that would take weeks to obtain. Meanwhile, Dubai's Indian community, which had once shunned Priya, rallied around her family. Women who had gossiped about her now brought food for her children. Men who had judged her organized search parties, combing through every possible route between the palace and Karama. The media circus began 3 days after her disappearance. First, the local Indian papers picked up the story. Expatriate businesswoman mysteriously vanishes. Then the international press caught wind. Missing Indian woman last seen at Dubai Palace. Sheikh Khalid maintained his distance, speaking only through lawyers. The restaurant construction mysteriously halted. Priya's stake in the business was transferred to a holding company in the Cayman Islands. The police investigation revealed troubling details. Security camera footage from the palace showed unusual activity in the service area late that night. A vehicle with diplomatic plates left the compound at 3:17 a.m., heading toward the desert. Vikram received anonymous calls suggesting he let the matter rest if he cared about his children's future. The Indian embassy faced subtle diplomatic pressure to classify the case as a voluntary disappearance. But it was the discovery in Priya's kitchen that broke the case wide open. Hidden behind her spice containers, investigators found a diary. The final entry, dated May 15th, read, "If anything happens to me, look beyond the obvious." Some silences speak louder than words. The children's questions became harder to answer. When is Mama coming home? Arjun would ask every night. Aya, more perceptive, stopped asking altogether. WhatsApp groups that had once spread gossip about Priya now shared prayers for her safety. The Indian community in Dubai, realizing too late the part they had played in her isolation, organized candlelight vigils. 10 days after her disappearance, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A palace gardener, breaking years of practiced silence, contacted the police. He had seen something that night. A car, a struggle, a muffled cry. His testimony would later prove crucial, but by then, the desert had already claimed its secret. The investigation would eventually uncover a complex web of power, passion, and fatal miscalculation. But on that warm May night, as Priya walked into the palace for the last time, she carried with her dreams of redemption. Dreams that would remain forever unfulfilled in the shifting sands of Dubai. The truth emerged from the desert like a mirage, exactly 40 days after Priya's disappearance. A Bedouin shepherd, following his goats through the dunes 40 kilometers outside Dubai, discovered what the shifting sands had temporarily revealed. The blue silk of her final sari, now weather-beaten and torn, caught the morning sun like a tragic flag. The autopsy report, heavily redacted before reaching public records, told a partial story. Signs of struggle. Asphyxiation. Time of death estimated between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. on that fateful night of May 15th. What the clinical language couldn't capture was the desperation of her final moments. the way dreams and reality had collided with lethal force. The evidence trail led in multiple directions, each path murkier than the last. The palace gardener's testimony sparked an internal investigation that revealed a complex network of surveillance and intimidation. Security cameras had been selectively disabled. Phone records were scrubbed. Witnesses suddenly developed convenient memory gaps. But pressure was mounting from unexpected quarters. The Indian embassy, initially cautious in its approach, faced growing demands from Delhi. Social media campaigns in India turned #Justice for Priya into a diplomatic flashpoint. Questions were being asked in the Indian parliament. The investigation uncovered layers of conspiracy that reached far beyond a simple affair. Sheikh Latifah, it emerged, had been monitoring Priya long before any suspicions arose. The restaurant project itself was revealed to be part of a larger scheme, a trap designed to ensnare both Priya and Sheikh Khalid in a scandal that would serve multiple agendas. Anonymous sources within the palace suggested that Priya's fatal mistake wasn't the affair itself, but her decision to end it. Her planned departure threatened to expose not just the relationship, but a web of financial transactions and power plays that implicated figures far beyond Dubai's royal court. The official investigation pointed to unknown assailants, a conclusion that satisfied no one but served everyone in power. 3 mid-level palace security officials were quietly dismissed. A small item in the financial pages noted the dissolution of certain business ventures. The restaurant building was repurposed into another luxury boutique. For Vikram and the children, justice remained an abstract concept. They left Dubai 2 months after Priya's body was found, their departure as quiet as their arrival had been 5 years earlier. Aya, wise beyond her years, packed her mother's recipes along with her toys. Arjun took the framed family photo from his bedside table, his last connection to a time when happiness seemed simple. The Indian community in Dubai found itself changed by the tragedy. The gossip that had once flowed freely now carried a bitter aftertaste. Women who had judged Priya began examining their own gilded cages. Men who had condemned her choices questioned the price of silence in their adopted home. At the Ul Wazl Community Center, where Priya had first caught the Sheikh's attention, her photograph appeared briefly on the wall of notable community members. It was removed within days, but its absence spoke louder than its presence had. Sheikh Khalid maintained his public duties, though observers noted he no longer attended Indian cultural events. His wife, the Sheikha, devoted herself to charitable works, establishing a foundation for expatriate women's welfare, an irony not lost on those who knew the full story. The case created subtle but significant shifts in Dubai's expatriate dynamics. Community leaders became more cautious in their interactions with the ruling class. Indian businesses quietly implemented protocols for staff working with influential clients. Women in the community spoke in whispers about maintaining safe distances from certain opportunities. Back in Delhi, Priya's parents transformed their grief into activism, establishing a support network for families of overseas workers. Their message was clear: the price of dreams shouldn't be measured in lives. Years later, Vikram would receive an anonymous package containing Priya's last writings, pages torn from her diary that had never made it to the police file. Her final entries revealed a woman caught between worlds, trying to navigate the treacherous waters of ambition, tradition, and desire. Dubai sells dreams, she had written, but nobody tells you that some dreams are beautiful traps. The higher you climb, the further you have to fall. The restaurant building still stands, now housing an international luxury brand. Sometimes, late at night, the cleaning staff claim they catch the scent of Indian spices, cardamom, saffron, the ghost of dreams that died with Priya. In the end, her story became a cautionary tale whispered in Dubai's expatriate communities, a reminder that in a city built on sand, even the most solid foundations can shift without warning. The glittering towers still rise toward the sky, but for some, their shadows fall darker and longer across the desert landscape. Aya, now studying in London, keeps her mother's handwritten recipes but hasn't cooked any of them. Some tastes, she tells friends who ask, are too painful to recreate. The desert keeps its secrets well. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right across the dunes where Priya was found, it carries whispers of untold stories, of dreams that soared too high, of boundaries crossed, of prices paid in full measure for the audacity of wanting more than life had offered. In Dubai, life moved on. New towers rose, new dreams were sold, new aspirants arrived daily to try their luck in the city of gold. But in the Indian enclave of Karama, in the quiet corners where memories linger, Priya's story serves as a reminder that some dreams come with price tags written in fine print, in ink that only becomes visible when it's too late to turn back.